Podcast Bites.
Welcome to the Fundamental Health Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Paul Saladino. This podcast is the result of my relentless search to understand and correct the roots of chronic disease and illness. In this podcast, I will share with you everything I have learned about how to live the most healthy and radical life possible. Thanks for joining me on this journey. This week, I had an amazing guest who is really a hero of mine. His name is Gary Fettke. He is an Australian orthopedic surgeon, and he has such an interesting story. He and his wife really went into the history books and tried to understand where the nutritional guidelines came from. What they found was really striking, and you'll hear about it in this podcast. The nutritional guidelines in the U.S. from the U.S. Dietetics Association began with a religious agenda, connected with the Seventh-day Adventist Church, connected with Lena Cooper, connected with people, John Harvey Kellogg, who was influenced by the Seventh-day Adventist, who was essentially brainwashed when he was a child. And their intentions, I think, were not malicious. But what is happening is that they are trying to prevent libidinous activities, which is probably the way a human should be. You know, when we have working hormones, we do have sexual urges. But it sounds like their entire intention is to prevent carnal desire, to prevent us from having a hormonal system that works by replacing many of the foods in our diets, which are nutrient rich and which allow us to be hormonally healthy, that is meat and animal products, allow us to thrive with carbohydrate, grain-laden cereals. So as you were saying, John Harvey Kellogg had the intention of creating cereals to help control sexual desires at a time in human history when there was a lot of alcoholism, when there was a lot of infidelity, when the Seventh-day Adventist Church saw a real need for this sort of intervention. And so I like what you're saying, that we're not saying that religion is bad or that these agendas are malicious, but I agree with you that it does not seem like the right thing for humans to have nutritional guidelines based on control of normal human physiologic processes with increased grain diets, and we should not be told what to eat. And the other thing that you're saying, which is so impactful, and I want people to be aware of, is that the Seventh-day Adventist Church has a great amount of influence now, and they are highly influential on a number of nutritional boards. They're in the highest levels of government, and this kind of explains what we're seeing today, that so much of the agenda, so much of the political agenda around food is going plant-based because of this political influence that the Seventh-day Adventist Church might be having.
It gets more complicated or simple from there. You have to realize that they were the birthright of the cereal industry of the world. They also effectively started the soy industry, the Western soy industry. So Harry China Miller, which is a Adventist doctor, effectively brought soy from the East to the West, infant soy formula. So they're effectively behind the soy industry of the world, the commercial side of it. And they started the alternative meat, the fake meat industry. They were John Harvey Kellogg came up with nut meat analogues in, I think, 1890s again. Yeah, very clever guy, invented this stuff. They were looking for alternate food sources so that it would suit the Garden of Eden diet as prophetized by Ellen G. White. So they are the soy industry, they are the cereal industry, they are the alternative meat industry. And if you track most of these industries down, they are all tied up with an incredibly wealthy church. They're only small in number, highly influential. They position themselves into health reform for the world. They are the second biggest educator after the Catholic Church worldwide. They own numerous hospitals. They own 28 hospitals in Florida alone. So if you think, and then, so they are the food industry as well. There's, big players in the food industry. They then, over time, so their commercial arm fits nicely in with their ideological arm. And as a result of that, that has influence. The other side of that is that they're involved in medical education. And so in the last few years in particular, there's been the term exercise is medicine. Most people have heard that, exercise more, eat less meat, as Belinda says, eat less meat. There's this argument. So exercise, it sounds good, exercise more, eat less. But exercise medicine is actually a trademarked term. exercise as medicine, that trademarking effectively came from Coca-Cola funding. Coca-Cola, and again, this talk here in San Diego. Coca-Cola were involved in the development of. They were behind funding for the Centre of Disease Control, Chinese Centre of Disease Control. They were founding members of ILSI, which is the International Life Sciences Institute. Look up ILSI and you will see big food and pharma, top to bottom. Their scientific arm of the food industry, their research arm is ILSI. And ILSI is reaching into every hospital, every university in the world. If you're trying to get research money, it's always a struggle. But they come into ILSI, it sounds pretty good. They'll supply the funding as long as the message and the answer is what we require. So what's happened particularly in the last few years is you've got this whole plant-based agenda coming down through the educational arm. Tied in with that, you've got exercise as medicine, which is actually ILSI, Coca-Cola pushing exercise. And they are forming LMed, which is one of the current arms. So when you see lifestyle medicine, that's in fact Seventh-day Adventist origins, now with Coca-Cola funding and linked up with ILSI to promote the whole concept of lifestyle medicine. Sounds great, eat less, exercise more, get your sleep, get the rest, get the right community involved, but eat less meat, plant-based is the message. And when you actually take it down, and all of their programs, including the CHIP program, it's about veganism. And so the problem with that is that that's now becoming the medical curriculum. And it's being introduced in 8 universities in the US at this point in time. We only thought it was 5 up until 3 days ago, and we've just been told it's now 8. So we've now got a whole generation of medical students who are being told, move more, eat less meat. And that's becoming the curriculum. The moment it becomes the curriculum, because the guidelines are, cereal-based anti-meat, as we talked about. When we have now a generation of doctors potentially going to come through who are in fact going to be doing harm, poisoning the next generation. And, it's happening. So we need to put a stop to it. Let's get people saying, what are the problems of eating real food? There aren't any. What are the problems of eating processed food? Well, that is a fad diet. We've been doing that for 100 years. It's screwed up. That's where we're at the moment. So our work, Belinda's work, is about letting people know where your education is coming from. Being aware that if you hear the term plant-based, understand, or the plant-based diet or the anti-meat agenda, realise that that's based on ideology and not biochemistry. And that'll be our message. Work out that this is not science. It is certainly not health as you extrapolate it down the path. And we've already got a health disaster. It's an economic disaster. It's a health disaster. It's a social disaster. And it's rapidly becoming an environmental disaster, which is one of my favourite side topics. Cereal monocultures, soy, sugar, that whole grain industry. Anti-meat is meaning we're taking nutrients out of the soil. The soil's getting eroded by wind and rain. And our health literally is being exported into the oceans. We've got a grandson. We want him to have a future, and we care so much about this. We no longer care.
It's a scary thought, especially what you're talking about now with medical education. I've talked about this a little bit in the past. I was not taught much about nutrition in medical school, but to think that ILSI can infiltrate medical education is terrifying. And to think that medical students are being taught these, as you suggest, religious ideologies, these religious agendas rather than science-based agendas is pretty bleak. And I think that we really need to work hard to reverse this. I just want people to understand where all of this anti-meat fervor is coming from. And I think it's quite revealing to understand that it's probably coming from religious agendas, from the Seventh-day Adventist Church, rather than science.
There is no box. You create that box in your mind, or someone else creates it for you.